Archaeology is an important part of our culture as it's able to answer questions about the history of mankind and at the same time raise many new ones. Almost every new discovery leads to a greater understanding about the generations and civilizations that came before us. The following examples, however, are discoveries that still remain a mystery and whose true meaning may never be uncovered. Are you fascinated by mysterious things and archaeological discoveries? Then give us a thumbs up, subscribe to Hidden Worlds, and join us on our journey. Roman lead coffins. The use of lead coffins in modern times tends to be associated with very unpleasant circumstances. They gained tragic notoriety for burials of the victims of Chernobyl. However, archaeologists have now discovered some lead coffins in England that appear to date back to Roman times and have little to do with victims of radiation sickness. Instead, researchers have found other explanations. It's thought the lead coffins were possibly once surrounded by a wooden coffin. Over the centuries, even the lead coffins have collapsed, and the remains of the bodies are in poor condition. It's assumed that this was a kind of ritual in which these coffins were associated with special fertility and an equally special path to posterity after death, but we still don't know for sure. Dinosaur fossil. Miners discovered the skeleton of a borealopalter by chance in Canada, and it's immediately of special importance for a variety of reasons. For one thing, it's the fossil of a dinosaur that has never been discovered in this form before. It also comes from a special type of giant lizard. The dinosaur's huge carapace must have likely made it resistant to carnivore attacks, while as a herbivore itself, fed only on plants. The dinosaur possibly drowned in the ocean and sank to the bottom of the earth quite quickly, where sediments quickly began to work on the skeleton due to its weight and particular conditions. This process over time eventually made it possible to recover one of the best preserved fossils in history from the mine in Canada. It's safe to say that researchers will be able to draw many more insights from the fossil in the years to come. Ancient honey discovered in Italy. It seems that researchers have made a discovery that proves the Etruscans from northern Italy once perfected the art of beekeeping. At least that's what a find in an ancient workshop of this long-extinct village in northern Italy suggests. The discovery of a nearly 2,500-year-old beehive and the remains of various tools used to process the honey led to the conclusion that the art was first perfected here. The find also matches some Roman records of this particular craft. For example, the beekeepers of the village apparently traveled with the hives along the rivers, feeding the bees with different flowers. Using a complex technique, they had bred them in large numbers and could process the honey into a wide variety of products. Pylos Kampfchat. The history of the Minoan culture is still a great mystery today. Almost all traces of this former Mediterranean empire have disappeared, even though it's well known that they likely ruled and lived mainly in the region around Crete. In the tomb of a warrior, a special artifact from this period has now been discovered. The seal shows two warriors in close combat, and research has shown that the seal was created around 3,500 years ago. Above all, the well-preserved condition was of particular importance to the experts. The significance for science is especially evident in the particularly detailed ornamentation. Prior to this discovery, it was thought that the creation of such a piece of jewelry was not possible at all without certain tools, and that this could only have been fashioned 1,000 years later. So this enigmatic culture seems to be a bit more advanced than anyone previously thought, and experts are still unsure as to how it was created. Dinosaur tail in Mexico. A team of dinosaur researchers have discovered a particularly well-preserved specimen of a dinosaur tail, no less than 5 meters long, in the desert of Mexico. Protected from the conditions in the desert, the artifact appears to be in particularly good condition and provides the researchers with a basis of a dinosaur that lived on Earth around 72 million years ago. Above all, the good condition will help to better understand the bone structures of dinosaurs and help to gain new insights into possible diseases and problems of the giant lizards. This is how tumors in dinosaurs have been discovered in the past, so it's quite possible that with this huge and well-preserved find, many new discoveries can be made that can help research in this area. the oldest fossil trees. Not only dinosaurs or small animals can be found in the fossils today, researchers also have the opportunity to find pieces of flora. With Archaeopteryx, for example, a fossil of a leaf was found, which until a later discovery in 2007 was considered evidence of the oldest known tree on Earth. The fossil is said to be up to 230 million years old. The tree is said to have once been around 24 meters high and had dense, distinctive leaves. There is arguably a distant relationship to some giant trees still found on Earth today. In addition, it's said to have been an important building block in the development of evolution, and it will be interesting to see what scientists will find out in their research. Ghost towers. Iran's economy is suffering. There is also a housing shortage in the country, and accordingly, the state has tried to provide the poor in particular with access to good housing with a number of projects. One of the results of these efforts are the almost spooky towers in the middle of the desert. Dozens of skyscrapers with apartments were built here without suitable surroundings and with nothing grown organically. White residential towers stretch out in the middle of the desert, which don't really fit into the landscape. The goal of building a quarter for the poor here was also not completed. Only the Iranian middle class could afford the apartments, and they had no interest in living in the middle of nowhere. Rhythm of life in California. If one thinks of strange figures in the middle of the desert, the well-known Nazca lines or similar monuments from the past come to mind. Not so in the desert of California, where artists have used a huge area for their own installations of this kind. Here they have gone wild and built various figures from white stones, which can be seen even from an airplane. According to artists, they are supposed to be symbols of the rhythm of life, hence the installation's somewhat idiosyncratic name. In fact, the figures now stretch over a considerable distance in the California desert and have become a tourist attraction. For a visitor unaware of the work, the strange figures are still likely to remain a mystery. The cocaine mummies in Egypt. Henat Tawi was a priestess of the 21st dynasty in ancient Egypt, and she was given the honor of being buried as a mummy. However, she achieved special fame mainly because she is said to be one of the cocaine mummies. Behind it hides a story that even today caused heated debates among archaeologists and connoisseurs of Egyptian antiquity. The principle is quite simple. During examinations of the mummies, a researcher found traces of hashish, cocaine, and nicotine in the hair. Several other studies have also confirmed this result. However, since cocaine is really only known as a product of cocoa leaves from South America, it raised the theory that the Egyptians may have had contact with people from that region. Other voices interject that it's more likely that these traces are impurities introduced during the discovery process. It's well known that the Egyptians used substances like nicotine throughout their lives, but how other intoxicants got into their hair is unlikely to be conclusively determined. Pyramids in Antarctica. The pyramids are one of the greatest mysteries in archaeology for many reasons. For one thing, the buildings are fascinating for the very reason that they were built. For another, these pyramids were created independently of each other at different times in all parts of the world, and therefore raised the theory that the exchange between Asia, Europe, Africa, and South America must have existed since ancient times. Of course, it fits into the picture of these theories if conforming buildings can also be found in Antarctica. The icy continent offers scope for a lot of speculation and mysteries anyway. Now, some people are believed to have discovered pyramids in the Arctic based on pictures taken from an airplane. And indeed, at first sight it seems as if such a monument could be found in the middle of the eternal ice. However, researchers have quickly put a stop to these rumors, saying it's likely a formation that was created by the permanent movements of the ice. It's also by no means a new discovery. There is an old research station at the base of the so-called pyramid, and the movements of the elevation have therefore been well documented for many decades. On the way to understanding the many peoples of history or cultures, even the smallest of findings can help. In the following video, we present you with a variety of curious discoveries from recent years that tell us more about lost civilizations or that have simply just amazed archaeologists. Egg-shaped ancient tomb. Normally, the tumuli of different regions have an almost identical shape and orientation. However, especially in China, the different influences of regions and dynasties are so great that even structures can differ greatly within a few decades. In addition, many of the former rulers sometimes had extravagant wishes for their burial sites. This could be one reason for the somewhat curious X-shaped tomb that has now been discovered during excavations in China. At first glance, it even bears a resemblance to the logo of a certain gaming console. Though for a while it was thought to be a marketing stunt or a hoax, the dome of the tomb featuring the X actually belongs to the Qin dynasty. Located inside the hill, it's assumed the structure was chosen because an altar once stood in the middle of the dome. In any case, it was a completely different site for the archaeologists who made the discovery. Salvation Mountain. It's not just historical excavations that amaze us. In the middle of the California desert, Salvation Mountain is a project that may be rediscovered in a few decades or centuries should it ever be forgotten. Inspired by the spirit of his god, Leonard Knight, with the help of countless gallons of paint and car scraps, erected a small paradise of colors and messages from the Bible. The value of this historic structure was quickly recognized, and now an entire group is working to preserve it from the adverse conditions of the desert. Without question, it's a place that amazes everyone who passes by. A forgotten civilization in Saudi Arabia. In the hot winds and sands of the Arabian Peninsula, it's sometimes difficult to conduct archaeological expeditions. This could be why great discoveries are rarely announced here, and yet artifacts have just been found that could point to a very big development. Traces of human habitation on this site date back as far as 50,000 years. The latest finds point to an advanced civilization, as many portraits of horses are to be seen. Researchers now assume that here, for the first time, a civilization could have observed how horses were domesticated. This theory is also supported by other findings, since it has been suspected for a long time that there are still the remains of lost civilizations in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, which were also great at the time of the Egyptians. This could be a new clue in the search to uncover them. The mysterious lakes of the BADAIN-JARAN Desert. In the west of Mongolia stretches one of the largest desert and steppe landscapes in Asia. While the almost unbearable aridity in this area has always made it a bit difficult for living creatures, researchers have discovered some phenomena in recent years that have left them puzzled. One in particular involves the strange lakes that suddenly appear in the middle of the desert. The lakes are spread over an area as large as an entire state, and so far there are no historical sources that have always existed. Instead, researchers assume that there must be an inlet from the groundwater that feeds these lakes, though this theory has many holes. At least half of the lakes appear to be fed by salt water, and others point to the harsh winters and possible ice. It seems the reason that gives rise to the mysterious lakes in the middle of the desert will remain hidden for the time being. 1200-year-old chessboard. The Tubo Kingdom in Tibet existed for 200 years in the period between 700 and 900 AD. It was particularly famous at the time for being a kingdom of diverse origins and ethnicities. Apparently, chess was one of the hobbies among scholars, as shown by an impressive stone found in the immediate vicinity of the former kingdom's borders. A chessboard was carved into these, as well as two areas where the pieces rest. The board differs from today's more modern chess. Versions of that time had 100 fields and not 64, but otherwise the approach is very similar. It's further proof that the game has been played for centuries and has enjoyed great popularity throughout the world. 1500-year-old pool in the depths of Israel. Near the site of an ancient church near Jerusalem, researchers have uncovered a system of pools that may date back to Byzantine times. This means that this pool could be up to 1500 years old. Also found in the immediate vicinity was an elaborate fountain depicting nymphs, some pottery, coins, and other relics that have rested here over the years. One of the interesting things about this discovery is that it was likely a whole connection of different basins. It's also certain that people had access to residential areas from here, but the actual church on the property was in the foreground. What exactly the purpose of the facility was is not entirely certain. Part of the property is still owned by the Armenian Church today. It may be the extensive pools were once used as a site for rituals or even baptisms, but it's also possible that they were part of an infrastructure for the gathering and relaxation of the faithful. Since it's only a small part of the excavations in this region, hopefully more will be discovered that answers these questions. The oldest known strain of plague. The plague has hit mankind in different places and at different times, with varying severity. The best known are certainly the outbreaks in the Middle Ages in Europe, which wiped out a considerable part of humanity on the continent. There is also clear evidence that the plague struck other parts of the world much earlier. Now, scientists are certain they have discovered the oldest known strain of the plague, and it's far older than previous investigations have assumed. The strain was found on a farmer in what is now Sweden who died 5,000 years ago, around 4,200 years before the plague killed around 50 million people in major outbreaks around the world. On the one hand, this refutes various theories about its origin and, in turn, supports the assumption that the plague likely originated around the Black Sea and then slowly migrated westward. The ancient handprint of the Picts. Little is known about the Picts in the north of England. It's documented that they were a warlike people who had their quarrels with both the Romans and the occupiers from Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Of course, English villages in the north were also regularly raided. However, in absence of any writing or real law, the known records of this tribe end very quickly, and even relics and artifacts are a rarity. Now, on an island of Scotland, a stone has been found that was possibly once the workplace of a coppersmith of the Picts. The peculiarity lies in the fact that the smith's handprint and knee indentation can still be seen today. It's believed that at the site where the stone was found, one might learn a little more about this mysterious culture and also perhaps about the fate of the blacksmith. The Boca de Potrerillos. Research into the original peoples of South America is difficult. A not inconsiderable part of the civilizations has disappeared in the jungle, and the occupiers from Europe have also done their part to mix up the traces of their existence. Therefore, a find like the one in Boca de Potrerillos is of great importance. Here is the largest collection of stone art that has been found so far in South America. In the immediate vicinity of Monterrey, Mexico, it's a veritable forest of boulders that are believed to have been painted by the peoples who lived here. The stones depict figures, scenes from people's lives, and clues as to how they might have once lived. Additionally, there are again many religious allusions that have also been found in other places during excavations and discoveries. The drawings could be an important piece of the puzzle on the way to a complete picture of the inhabitants of this region. Montejo de Tiermes. In Spain and on the Iberian Peninsula, there is a large number of people about whom nothing is known today. This is why the Tiermes archaeological site is so important, as there seems to have been a society here since the Iron Age. Some of the old stone houses are still preserved, and there are a variety of workshops and finds to discover. Whoever lived here even stayed through Roman times and successfully resisted the occupation. In addition to sculptures and handcrafts, various indications have been found that the area was inhabited well into the 3rd century AD. The traces only disappear with the migration of the Visigoths and the Moorish conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. Many archaeologists rightfully consider themselves explorers, and not all of them are found in ancient ruins or aspire to the pyramids of Egypt. Instead, they are all over the world, trying to unearth the last secrets of human history. The following examples offer a glimpse into what archaeologists are finding and how they can, in part, change the histories of our world. 2 rare swords. One of the things that most history buffs associate with Japan is the art of making particularly sharp, high-quality swords. In general, the sword has always played a very special role in Japanese culture. Now, in an old tunnel which is said to date back to the 6th century, 2 old swords have been found, which must have once been magnificent gifts to someone especially revered. Tunnels were a very early form of burial for great warriors and important people. The swords were found next to two skeletons together with their armor and the armor of the horses. Although the swords are not in good condition today, they still reveal a lot about their history and that of their bearers. One of the swords is said to have been about 150 centimeters long, which would make it the longest sword from ancient Japan. The other was wrapped in a sheath of stingray leather, making it particularly valuable. They are both believed to date from around 300 BC and were likely only given to the highest-ranking official working for the kingdom at the time. The megaliths in Ethiopia. It's been known for a long time that Ethiopia probably belongs to the cradle of mankind. It was from here that the first humans set out and spread across the continents of the world. However, some of them also stayed in the region itself and founded the first civilizations and developed it into a culture. A testimony to this seems to be the megaliths that can be found all over Ethiopia. Some of them have been worked, others were possibly used only as spaces of worship. Still, others have taken on the role of a tomb or dwelling on the side. To this day, they are considered important cultural treasures of the first civilizations of mankind and are an important part of research on the first steps our ancestors took. The Mask of the Bat God. Deep in the Mexican jungles, the remains of the once powerful South American civilizations are still hidden today. Many of the former cities are still relatively well preserved and tell the story of the former empires that were shaped here. An example of this is the Zapotec Empire, which appears to have had its capital in the city of Monte Alban. Here, a mask was found in the depths of the temples, which is still a major point of scientific debate. The consensus results that it's likely a mask about 2,200 years old, which is supposed to represent a bat. It's believed that the bat's characteristics, and especially its famous drinking of blood, were adopted directly into the cults of the people, and the mask was therefore worn by the priest while they performed appropriate sacrificial rituals. Today, the mask can be seen in the museum of the region. Missionary work through cave drawings. When Europeans landed in the Americas about 1,500 years ago, they quickly began to make contact with natives. Just as quickly, they began making attempts to convert the local population to the Christian faith. Several thousand cave drawings and inscriptions in the Caribbean now reveal a new picture of the missionaries in the New World. It seems that with the help of drawings and typical phrases like "God forgives you," they tried to enlighten the natives of their Christian God and convert them to Christianity. While the settlers were still comparatively successful with this in South America, these efforts were not exactly productive in the north. This new section, however, provides an equally new insight into the history of colonization by European peoples and the rapid displacement of indigenous culture. The Taklamakan Desert and its mummies. Mummies are not a phenomenon confined to ancient Egypt alone. In China, a large number of mummies of various ages have recently been found to be particularly well preserved. They were part of a burial site deep in the Taklamakan Desert. This is particularly known for its dry air, which may have played a significant role in keeping the mummies so well preserved to this day. The peculiarity lies in the fact that people from different centuries seem to be buried in the site. The oldest mummy is estimated to be around 3,800 years old, and another is thought to have been around 2,200 years old. People are not quite sure what kind of civilization settled here. Some believe it to be immigrants from the European area who stayed for a period of time, while others believe it was simply the burial place of various societies. That being said, the discovery of the mummies has contributed to a better understanding of culture that previously little was known about. The Tree of Life in Bahrain. In the middle of the desert of Bahrain, a green tree can be found. How is this possible when absolutely nothing grows around it? The tree is a 400-year-old specimen of Prosopis cinenaria. With dense green leaves and sprawling branches, it's not only a source of shade in an otherwise deadly environment, but also an important attraction for tourists visiting the region. However, researchers are still not entirely sure how the tree survives in this hostile environment. One theory is that, thanks to its age, its roots are now so deep that they can reach a final groundwater reservoir beneath the desert. For that to happen, they would have to be 50 meters long. Others believe that it's the last remnant of the Garden of Eden and therefore satiates itself from mythical sources. Either way, apparently people lived here 500 years ago. Perhaps they are responsible for the strange tree in the middle of the desert. The SAJAMA lines in Bolivia. South America and its elaborate ornamentation of the soil have posed many a mystery to explorers. Wherever the Aborigines have been found, the lines have also been found, and there seems to be no certain and definite explanation for any of it. The peculiarity with the SAJAMA lines is not only that they are hundreds of paths that cross each other, but it's especially remarkable that all these lines are absolutely straight and in a terrain that is not really meant for humans. It's further proof that the indigenous people of South America had a technique that is no longer understood. The whale cemetery in the middle of the desert. About 150 kilometers south of Cairo, you'll find a marvel you'd not expect to see in the middle of the desert. Here, there is a prehistoric excavation site where a large number of skeletons can be found, but these are not dinosaurs. A look at the bones very quickly reveals that they are obviously whales. But how could whales come to the middle of the desert, where the Nile as well as the sea are partly hundreds of kilometers away? It seems that with this discovery, a mystery about the evolution of whales has been solved. Theories have been around for some time that whales, like crocodiles, were once creatures that lived primarily on land and only disappeared into the water over the millennia. Given the skeletons found here, this theory might be considered proven. Others point to an ancient sea that might have once been here, but there is little evidence to support this in the research to date. And so, for now, the whale skeletons in the desert remain a hotly debated phenomenon. China's Mars simulation in the Gobi Desert. Even though many companies and great minds are working on it, it will possibly still take a few decades before the first humans can set foot on Mars. Dreams of a colony on the Red Planet are likely a matter of generations, if it ever happens at all. China has now opened an attraction in the Gobi Desert that allows visitors to recreate life on Mars, at least for a few hours. The attraction is meant to represent a base on Mars, and visitors here can not only immerse themselves in futuristic exploration, but also take trips in a spacesuit themselves and experience a landing simulation. Sure to be an interesting treat for those who have no hope of landing on Mars themselves someday. The former life in the Black Desert of Jordan. The Black Desert of Jordan is one of those areas on Earth that offers no chance of survival for humans. The climate could only be endured with the most difficult of efforts, and life does not really exist here. If one believes records, which are supposedly about 2,000 years old, this was not always so. Inscriptions on stones tell of how life once flourished and how people lived well in the area. There is evidence that several societies once lived here together in the desert, how they fought against each other, and what their challenges were in everyday life. Researchers have now taken it upon themselves to find out what changed the environment and when people disappeared from this area where life once flourished. So, some surprising and absolutely spectacular discoveries that experts have made in recent years. You can be sure there were and are many other discoveries of this kind on our beautiful planet. Can you think of any examples? Let us know below in the comments.